With so many handheld PC options, it's getting really hard to stand out. But somehow OneXFly managed to do that with their latest OneXFly. Now, this is a prototype unit, so it wouldn't be fair to me to say I'm going to give you a full review on it because it's not a finished product. But luckily TechDad managed to get a hold of this and he let me borrow it. So what I want to do today is share my experience with it and tell you why I think this might be one of the best handheld PCs that's about to hit the market. Now, like we usually do, we're going to start off talking about the price and the specs. And you're going to have quite a few options to choose from if you decide to pick up the OneXFly with quite a few different models. Starting off in the low end with 16GB of RAM and 512 storage for $739, putting it in that Steam Deck ROG Ally category, all the way up to $1299 for the 64GB of RAM and 4TB of internal storage. Now, getting a little bit more specific, you're going to have the 7840U as your CPU. GPU, we have the Radeon 780M. We have 16 all the way up to 64GB of LPDDR5 RAM, 512 all the way up to 4TB of PCIe M.2 SSD, a 7-inch 120Hz screen. Now, unfortunately, in this prototype unit, I only have a 60Hz screen, but I think that's actually better, and I'll talk about why I believe that here in a little bit. And we have a 48 Wh battery, making it a larger battery than both the Steam Deck and the Ally. Stereo speakers, Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5.2. Now, I know the specs aren't something we haven't seen before, but it's what happens when you put it all together and you put it into this package that you start to think they might have something special here. So let's take a look at the hardware. So let's get right into it, and they pretty much nailed it when it comes down to ergonomics and build quality. But I will start off with a negative. I wish these caps were a little bit bigger on the sticks because they just feel like they're not quite the right size. Now, that doesn't mean this is a bad experience at all. They actually feel very good, and I didn't put a cap on them, so I guess I'm kind of contradicting myself here, but they would be better if they were a little bit bigger. Now, as far as the actual function, they're great. They have no dead zone. They have an awesome glide to them. They just feel really good. Moving on to the D-pad. The D-pad is a rubber membrane based D-pad and it feels very precise. It has a very short travel, but not in a bad way. It just doesn't feel stiff, but it does feel precise. So it's one of those things where you really have to hold it in your hands to understand what I'm saying. Now, unfortunately, it didn't pass the wiggle test, which means if you push it down and you wiggle it a little bit, you're going to get some accidental inputs. But this wasn't really a problem when I was playing things like Celeste, which require very precise inputs. So overall, the D-pad is really good. On the bottom, we have a function button that takes you back to the desktop, and up top we have our select button. Now, I want to take a second here to talk about the paint job on this handheld because it's very unique. It has this almost soft touch feel to it, which I was worried it was going to leave a lot of fingerprints, but luckily that really wasn't a problem. And don't worry, this isn't that type of paint that has that rubbery feel that over time turns into a sticky mess. This is just a solid paint job that gives you a very nice texture and a very unique look. And as you can clearly see, fingerprints really aren't an issue, which is a big plus. A lot of darker color handhelds have this problem where as soon as you're done playing, it's just a fingerprint mess. On the bottom, we have our left speaker, and the sound quality is great. It gets very loud without any real distortion, and it's very clear. Quick side note here, I'm sorry about my hands. I haven't been very kind to them lately, and I didn't realize they were looking this bad. I hope that's not too distracting. Now back to what matters, and on the other side we have our right speaker, which like I just said, the sound quality is great, so no complaints there. On the bottom we have one of our USB Type-C ports and our SD card slot. Moving on to the right side of the controller, we have one of my favorite things about this handheld, and that's these face buttons because they're rubber membrane, which I'm a big fan of, but they also have a very short travel, so they're great for games like Hades or Celeste where you need very fast inputs. But they're quiet, so it's easy to use it when you're in bed or when you're on the bus or basically when you're anywhere that you don't want to annoy somebody else. On the bottom we have our right stick, which also has a customizable RGB ring, so you know it's going to be fast. And we also have 3 more face buttons. On the top, we have our start button, and on the bottom, we have 2 function keys. One is going to be for our keyboard and for switching back and forth between mouse and controller mode, and the other one's going to bring out our control panel. Besides the RGB rings, we also have these customizable RGB panels, which are going to change in color along with whatever setting you put on the sticks. And one of them says cream cake, so I'm not really sure what OneXFly was trying to say here. I think they're trying to hit on Retro Tech Dad because this was his unit, but I'm not really sure. I'll definitely have to ask him next time we're on the podcast. On the other side, it says OneXFly, so that makes more sense, but this is just one of those really weird things the AI does sometimes when they're designing stuff, so I guess we'll just have to live with it. You can customize this when you order it, so it's not going to say cream cake unless you want it to, but that's more of a personal preference, I guess. Moving on to the top, we have our analog triggers, and once again, these are some of the best analog triggers I've ever tried on any handheld. They just feel great. They have a really nice travel to them. On top of them, we have our left bumper, and right next to that, we have a function button, which can be mapped to multiple things using the control panel, like an Xbox button or an escape button, whatever you want to use it for. On the other side, we have our other analog trigger and our right bumper. Next to that, we have a full USB-A port, our USB-C port, our headphone jack, and our volume rocker, which was bigger than you would expect, but I don't dislike it. Next to that, we have our power button. On the back, we have a good size intake vent and a prototype sticker, so you know this is high level stuff. I will say, as far as cooling, they did a really good job because I never really noticed heat being an issue, and I was running some fairly demanding games. Well, once I got them to work, but more on that later. Before we move on, we have to talk about the screen, and retail units are going to have a 7-inch 120Hz panel. This is only a 60, but I wish it was a 60 in retail units because 120 without variable refresh rate just isn't going to be a good experience, because a lot of the newer games just aren't going to hit those higher frame rates, so you're going to have to lock them at lower frame rates anyway, and a 60Hz panel would have just been better for both battery life and performance instead of just trying to chase a number for a tech spec. But this is just my opinion, and we have to wait for retail units to really get an idea of how good it's going to be.
In this next section, we're going to be talking about the control panel, but keep in mind that it's not finished yet, so there might be some issues. You might see a crash, the font might not be right, little things like that, but we are going to be able to do enough to get a good idea of how good it's going to be and what features might be lacking. The first thing we're going to be looking at is our keyboard button. So a simple press is going to bring up the keyboard, and if we hold it down for a couple seconds, it's going to switch between mouse mode and controller mode. Right below that button, we have another button that's going to give us access to our quick panel. From here, you're going to have a few sliders that are going to let you adjust different things like brightness, CPU boost, fan profiles, on which unfortunately you can't set custom profiles, at least not in this version of it, so I hope that gets updated. But there's also vibration settings, and you can also set custom resolution. So if you wanted to change the screen resolution on the fly, you could just go in here and change that. And right next to that, we have a little panel here that lets us control our RGB lights. So if you wanted to switch up the colors or the way they're rotating, you can have that option right here. Now, one cool thing is that as you change them, the letters are also going to change colors. So they're in sync. Whatever the sticks are doing, the little logos on our side are going to be doing. And right next to that, we have one of the worst features on this handheld. And I say the best because it is extremely useful, but worst because of how much of a pain it is to use. As you can see right here, it just crashed everything. But basically what it does is it lets you set an overlay so you can see the statistics, but also lets you set an auto TDP function. So if you just want to play and you don't want to be having to adjust TDPs and going through all that hassle, you can just let the system figure out how much it actually needs to make the game run right. The downside is that it's annoying, it crashes all the time, and sometimes it just doesn't work. So I'm sure this is going to get fixed. This is just the struggles I'm going through right now. So don't worry, I'm 99% sure when you get this handheld, this isn't going to be an issue for you. Alright, so we're back in, and that's basically the control panel. Now, it is functional, and like I said, I'm sure a lot of these kinks are going to get worked out. As of right now though, it's a little bit frustrating to use, and it's pretty bare bones. There are some features that I wish it had, like for example being able to create custom fan profiles, because I like to do that on my handheld PCs because I find that they tend to be a little bit louder than they really need to be. Now this one wasn't too bad, but still I would have liked to be able to set my own. That's just one of those things, and just having things function right, just being able to press a button and having them actually work would be great. And again, I'm sure this is going to get fixed. And while that's great because you definitely want things to work, there's no promise that we're going to get all these features, at least not that I'm aware of. If anybody knows or has heard anything different, please let me know in the comments. Now, besides that panel, we also have a full game launcher, so you're going to be able to add your games here and launch them directly without having to go to different services. Right now, I have a couple games from Game Pass and Steam games added here, but you could also add games from GOG and other services too. So this is just if you want to have a convenient way of just launching everything and not really have to open all those services up. Besides functioning as a game launcher, you can also set what the controller does from here, and if you wanted to navigate, you could use the shoulder buttons to do that, or just a simple tap on the screen. Unfortunately, I'm having some issues with my button input, so we're just going to do the screen method, and I will fix that here in a second. Again, it's a prototype, so keep that in mind. Things will break. But moving on, once you're in that menu, you can actually adjust pretty much anything you want, from the sticks to the shoulder buttons, the triggers, everything. So if you wanted to switch how something's functioning, or you wanted to set up some specific key combos, you can definitely do that from here, which it's very customizable, so that's a big plus. And one thing I feel like I really need to stress here is that this is a prototype unit, so there's no reason to believe that the unit you get is going to be like this. This is just the experience I was having with it, and I gotta say, not to spoil the rest of the video, but even with those things, I still absolutely love this thing. But it's still janky, so like with this for example, when you bring up the keyboard and you go into the Windows menu, you can't really use a keyboard. Now this is the only area where this happens, and it's just weird that that would happen because it only happens with this specific keyboard. So if I was using the regular Windows keyboard, it wouldn't be a problem. But since I have the one with the One X skin, it just doesn't work when I'm in the Windows menu for some reason. So I don't know what's up with that. And after all that, I think we can finally get some games and look at the actual performance here, because all I keep hearing is how good that 7840U chip is, and I'm really excited to see how... Okay, not a huge deal. I can fix The Witcher later, not a big deal. At least we got Starfield running. This is a game everybody's talking about. It sounds like this is like the greatest game ever, so definitely having... What? Okay, so once Starfield crashed, it took my buttons with it, so I couldn't do anything with the buttons. They just wouldn't respond. Like, I could get the keyboard up and I could get the panel to work, but that's it. I couldn't do anything else. So eventually I got them working again, because Windows is gonna Windows. That's kind of the downside of using it. And I thought, you know what, I'll work on the PC games here in a little bit. Let's look at the emulation side of things. So I loaded up Xbox 360, and at first I thought, this is awesome, it's working, no problem, and then crash. So I loaded up a different game and I tried Red Dead Redemption, and again at first it looked like it was gonna work, and then out of nowhere, crash. So I decided I'm gonna try PlayStation 3, and this time it didn't crash, but the game was unplayable. It was just a black screen. I could still see the UI, I just couldn't see anything else. So I figured, you know what, there's got to be something going on with the drivers. So I went on and I installed the brand new AMD drivers, and I did all the updates, as I probably should have done from the beginning, but you know what, this was a learning process. And as soon as I did that, I loaded up a game, and this is when things got really good. But since I know retro and indie games will pretty much run on anything, I loaded up Starfield and I played for a good amount of time, just at least long enough to get an idea of what the game is like and how it's going to run. And it ran great. I mean, the 7840U is a very, very capable chip. It's the best chip you can get on a handheld right now, so of course it's going to run it. But knowing and experiencing it are two different things, so it wasn't until I actually loaded up the game and I saw what this looks like on this 7-inch screen that I kind of realized that things are different now. I mean, we're not trying to run Game Boy Advance games anymore or just get Super Nintendo to work on a handheld. Nowadays, you have a full-on PC in your hands. And I know I have a Steam Deck, I have other handhelds, and I should pretty much understand this, but it still blows my mind every single time I see something like this work on a handheld. It's just an amazing experience. But there is a downside, of course. You're not going to get great battery life running a game like this at 1080p, even with FSR set to 2, which is what's going to happen. You're going to have some settings here to kind of get this game running better than it really should. and you're probably going to get about an hour to an hour and a half of battery life depending on how bright your screen is and how intensive the area you're at is at that time. But that's basically what you should expect as far as battery life with heavy AAA games. An hour, maybe an hour and a half, but that battery can really stretch all the way to 5 hours, give or take a few, depending on how light and easy the game is to play. So that is one thing to keep in mind. These very high and powerful handhelds, they can run pretty much anything you throw at them, but they'll burn battery like crazy, and the OneXFly is no exception. Even with a larger battery, you're not going to be able to just take this out and rely completely on the battery if you're trying to play a heavier game. I can't thank Retrotech that enough for letting me borrow this and having a chance to play with it. Even though this is a prototype unit and it wasn't the smoothest experience, it was definitely a fun one. They potentially have a winner here if they're able to fix some of the issues that they had here, and I'm sure most of them are going to be addressed. There's a lot of good things going for this handheld. One is ergonomics. It feels great to play on it. It's a very comfortable handheld to use. Two, it looks really good. You know, at first I thought this was going to be a super gamery, you know, kind of edgy look, but it actually works with it. It's not distracting. Still not sure what's up with the cream cake on there. I don't know. That was a weird decision. Sometimes the AI just goes crazy. But overall, this is a winner if those things get fixed. Larger battery, beautiful screen. That 120 Hz refresh rate screen, I'm still not sold on it. I guess I need to really use one to get that experience, but with that variable refresh rate, I don't know. You know, I'll have to wait for a retail unit, which is exactly why I can't really say whether I recommend it or not, because we don't know what the finished product is going to look like. As far as we know, it could be perfect on launch or it could still be a mess. I don't know. But considering that I was able to work around pretty much every issue that I had, I don't see why they wouldn't be able to just fix it with the final release. But if after seeing this and all the other videos that are out so far, you're still not sold on it, just wait a little bit longer. We should start seeing some retail units pop up pretty soon. As far as this video, I hope it was informative. I hope you enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun making it. I had a lot of fun with this handheld. So if you did like the video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. If you want to share with somebody, we would really appreciate it. It really helps us grow. And if you're watching this video and you're not subscribed, what are you waiting for? Come on. We put a lot of content out here. We put a lot of good content out here, and we're going to be doing a lot of fun stuff. So come join us, come check out our Discord, and just come have a good time with us. You know, I appreciate you watching. This was a good one. I hope you liked it too, and have a great day.